One thing I've always loved the most about Mario games are the wide array of unique enemies that always try and get in your way, either from collecting stars or getting to the end flagpole. However, what I liked even more was that some of these enemies could be very helpful in either defeating other enemies, getting collectibles, or traversing through tough areas. This led me to want to create today's video about the most useful enemies in every Mario game, where I'll go through all the mainline titles, showcasing each of Mario's foes and how exactly they can help you. Oh yeah, and before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel, hit that bell button, and please click on that join button and become a member if you want to support me so I can make videos for years to come. Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System is the very first game we're gonna look at, which actually has a small amount of enemies with only 15 in total, where there are only 3 that will help you during your playthrough. The first and most iconic is the Koopa Troopa, that are turtle-like baddies that can be stomped on to force them out of their shell, where you can then kick that shell towards enemies or bricks, clearing the path in front of you. You do have to be a bit careful, as these shells can ricochet back towards Mario and damage him. Of course, these Koopa shells are also used to pull off this game's Infinite Lives exploit, by jumping on them continuously while it's up against a step at the end of World 3-1. If you do it just right, you'll string up a combo that should last until you gain the game's maximum amount of lives. Another enemy similar to the Koopa Troopa is the Buzzy Beetle, as it's also a shell-based foe that can be kicked. However, it does differ greatly in some ways, including being much rarer to come across, and are completely impervious to fireballs. Just a bit of a note before we move on, I won't mention the same enemy through each and every game unless their function of helpfulness changes. So just a heads up on that so you guys aren't confused thinking I may have missed one. The next game in the series is Super Mario Bros. 2, which has some very unique enemies and different uses for them, basically because Nintendo revisioned a game called Yumi Kojo Doki Doki Panic for North American audiences after the true Japanese sequel was deemed too hard and too confusing. One major outlier is that almost every enemy can be picked up and thrown, which is a deviation from the regular stomping of foes to defeat them. This also allows you to travel on top of enemies without taking damage, meaning that you can use the Ostro, Trouter, Autobomb, and Albatos to traverse across terrain where you'd usually otherwise lose a life. A staple enemy of the franchise that makes its debut here is the Bob-omb, that explodes pretty quickly in your hands, so you have to get rid of it fast. One strange enemy that you can use to your advantage is the Whale, that can be found in World 4-2, that periodically shoots water from its spouts that you need to use as platforms to get up to higher areas. By far my favorite enemy from this game, which is also one of the most useful, is the Pidgeot, which is a bird-like foe that's riding on top of a magic carpet, swooping down from time to time trying to damage you. This Pidgeot can be removed from the carpet, where you can then ride it yourself, and in combination with Peach's Glide, will allow you to skip a large portion of World 1-2. The final game of the NES trilogy, Super Mario Bros. 3, introduces a major change to shelled enemies, where you can now pick them up and throw them in the direction that you want. This change to Koopas and Buzzy Beetles is important, as you can use the shell to strategically defeat enemies and trigger blocks to uncover secrets. A new type of foe that I love, that are also very useful, are the Goombas riding in shoes, that can be knocked out of to use for yourself. These shoes will allow you to jump a bit higher, while also protecting you from enemies that would usually damage Mario from below. The first handheld game in the series that Nintendo developed is Super Mario Land, which came out for the Game Boy in 1989. In this title, Koopas act very different than any other game before or after it, as they now have a bombshell, which activates once they're stomped on, exploding a short time later. Although this can be used to your advantage to defeat enemies, it's actually pretty tough to do that, so it's probably just better to stay out of this foe's way. An interesting note about the Bombshell Koopa is that it only exists because Nintendo had a lot of trouble coding for the regular Koopa shells, so they opted for a much more simple explosion mechanic. The only other somewhat useful enemy in this game is the Ganchon, which is a rock that's thrown by the Hyoyoi boss in the Eastern Kingdom. You can actually platform on this rock-like foe, which allows you to travel across spiked areas and jump across large gaps. The next home console game in the series is Super Mario World, which was released for the SNES in 1991, containing several unique enemies that all help you out on your journey of rescuing the princess. The amazing Flying Hammer Bro is an enemy that instantly sticks out to me as it's a foe that's riding on a platform, throwing hammers to the ground below. How this enemy becomes useful is that you can defeat it and actually use the platform it's riding on to reach higher up areas. Another enemy that you can use as a platform are the Boo Buddy blocks, which appear at first to be normal boos, but when Mario looks at it, will transform into a block that you can platform on. Super Mario World is also the very first game in the series where the spiny egg-throwing Lakitu can be knocked out of his cloud by cape spinning or throwing an object at it, where then the cloud can be ridden by Mario for a short period of time before it disappears. There's also another Lakitu enemy that can be very helpful in this game, in the fishing Lakitu, as it literally has a 1-up mushroom at the end of its line that you can easily collect. The only downside is that this enemy appears only once in the entire game in the Forest of Illusion 4. A really strange enemy that I want to mention from this game is the Super Koopa, which instead of a shell is equipped with a cape, where if one of them is flashing, will drop a cape feather power-up that you can use. The only other thing I want to go over is how looking up specific colored Koopa shells gives Yoshi different abilities. Eating a red shell will allow you to spit out 3 fireballs, eating a yellow shell will give you the ability to cause miniature earthquakes, and eating a blue shell will allow Yoshi to fly for a limited amount of time. The second handheld entry in the franchise is Super Mario Land 2, which was released for the original Game Boy in 1992. This title is jam-packed full of enemies that are completely unique to the specific game, but unfortunately, only 2 are actually useful in completing it. The first, of course, is the Koopa Troopa. The Nintendo was finally able to figure out how to code their shell for this handheld title. That works basically the same as in previous games, but Mario now holds it high above his head that does look a bit different. The other enemy is the bear, which is definitely a strange foe who is riding on top of a bouncy beach ball and needs to be knocked off so you can use it for yourself. I'm actually surprised there weren't more useful enemies from this game, but I do understand that there were certain limitations to what Nintendo could pull off at that time on the Game Boy. The very first 3D game in the series is Super Mario 64, that was released for the N64 in 1996. Enemies in the 3D Mario realm work a bit different than in the regular 2D scenarios, and this is evident in the Koopas. Instead of using their shells to throw at other enemies, you instead surf on top of them, being able to run into other foes to defeat them and climb up steep slopes you otherwise wouldn't be able to. This game is also the very first where you can platform on top of the thwomps, where you need to use this specific one in Whomp's Fortress to gather a red coin that's a bit higher up in the air. An enemy that's like the thwomp that you need to platform on to reach higher up areas is the Grindle, that only appears inside the pyramid of shifting sandlands. These foes either move vertically or horizontally, and will squish Mario if he's underneath them. One of the most annoying enemies from this game that's actually somewhat useful are the Heave-Hoes, that are featured heavily in the Wet Dry World course. These wind-up toys do one of 2 things. Either fling you up to the platform above you, letting you access unreachable areas, or flings you through the air, missing any platform above you, and taking damage when you hit the ground. Another enemy that can send you flying, albeit in a safer way, are the Spindrifts, that when bonked off, cause Mario to shoot up in the air and spin slowly back to the ground, actually allowing you to reach some inaccessible areas. The final useful enemy that we're going to look at from this game is the Money Bags, that will actually give you 5 coins when stomped on. This is a bit difficult to find at first, as it disguises itself as a single coin, that attempts to run away when you get close, but it will eventually get tired where you can then strike. The next home console game in the series is Super Mario Sunshine, a GameCube title that was released in North America in 2002. This somewhat out-of-place Mario game uses the FLUDD as the main gameplay element, allowing for some easier platforming and leads to some very different interactions with enemies. One perfect example of this is with the Poink, which is a balloon-like pig creature that becomes attached to the FLUDD and can be filled up with water, launched like a rocket. This allows you to deal damage to enemies much farther away that would otherwise be unreachable. Another sort of helpful enemy from this game is the Cataquack, which operates very similarly to the Heave Hose in Super Mario 64, as they fling you up in the air, either causing you to take fall damage, or letting you reach an area that would otherwise be harder to get to. One returning enemy that's been slightly updated from his previous versions is the Bullet Bill, now in purple form, that have a homing beacon on their noses, meaning that they will always follow Mario until they crash into an object or get destroyed. These are useful when you want to 100% the game, as they are needed to break open baskets in Pinna Park's beach that will reveal some of the game's hidden blue coins. The next handheld game in the series Nintendo would release returned to the 2D platforming genre in New Super Mario Bros. For the DS. Now, there aren't actually any newly added enemies that will help you along your journey, but there is a change to the money bags, as it will now dish out way more coins when you stomp on it or hit it with a fireball. But unfortunately, when I was filming this, mine decided to jump off the edge for some reason, so I could never get to that point. One of the most interesting settings in the franchise comes from the next game I'm going to talk about in Super Mario Galaxy, that was released for the Nintendo Wii in 2007. One of my favorite enemies from this game that's also very useful is the Bomb Boo, that has the interesting mechanic of being able to get caught up in Mario's spin attack, twirling around the main character, until it crashes into a wall or object and explodes. Another new enemy that you need to use a lot to progress through the levels and even fight bosses with is the Octopus, that shoots flaming rocks and coconuts towards you, where the coconuts can be deflected back at them with a spin attack. One strange enemy that acts similarly to the moneybags is called the Peta Peta. That's a sack-like creature with oddly sandal-clad feet. When Mario defeats this usually invisible enemy, it will drop 20 star bits instead of the expected coins. This entry also adds brand new types of enemies in mechanical ones like the Jump Beamer, Jump Guarder, and the Spring Top Man that can be all jumped on and used like a trampoline to reach much higher heights than usual. Another type of this enemy is the Water Shooter, found through several levels in the game that are usually a hindrance trapping Mario within a water bubble, but on occasion are useful in transporting you to hard to reach areas. The next two enemies are ones that have appeared in previous titles, but are slightly changed in Super Mario Galaxy, starting with the Twister. This tornado-like foe can be used to turn Mario into a helicopter if you spin just as you enter it. This will allow you to traverse through portions of the Dusty Dune Galaxy much more smoothly. The Koopa Troopa is the other enemy that has significant changes in this game, as their shells are the main way of traveling underwater, allowing you to swim much faster, where you also have the option to throw them to defeat enemies and open chests. Nintendo will return 2D Mario platforming to a home console system with New Super Mario Bros. Wii, that was released for the Nintendo Wii in 2007. A new enemy that can be useful if platformed on properly is the Bramble, which is a ball-like creature with two spiked legs where the only part that's safe to jump on is its head. You'll definitely need to use this foe to collect the game's star coins, specifically the only level it appears in World 5-3. Another new enemy that shows up in World 8-4 is the Bulber, that are fish that swim back and forth, illuminating the area around them, letting you see through this dark underwater level. In this exact same stage, there's also an enemy called the Jelly Beam, that are jellyfish-like creatures that swim up and down, illuminating the area beneath them. The only other enemy from this Wii title I want to touch on are the very large, heavy parabeetles that can't actually damage Mario and need to be used as platforms to traverse across the large gaps of World 7-6. If the player jumps on 8 consecutively without touching the ground, then they'll be rewarded with a 1-up mushroom, which makes the beetle seem more like a friend than a foe. Nintendo would go on to make a sequel to the much-beloved Super Mario Galaxy with Super Mario Galaxy 2, that was released in North America for the Wii in 2010. For my research, I could only find 3 somewhat useful enemies, starting with the Thwomp, which is a living platform that spins every 3 seconds, knocking Mario off if he stays on for too long. These platform foes are necessary to use to complete parts of Bowser's Lava Lair and the Grandmaster Galaxy. Another strange platform-like enemy from this game is the Flower Mimic, that can be used to platform on, but after 3 seconds will snap shut, damaging you. The last enemy I want to mention from this game is one called the Kleptoad, which is a small frog-like being that pops out of the ground during the Silver Stars Challenge in Hightail Falls. Like their name entails, they like to steal things, so you'll usually come across them holding coins, items, and, in this case, silver stars. The next handheld game that was released on the 3DS in 2011 is Super Mario 3D Land, that incorporated 2D aspects with 3D elements, leading to some very interesting enemies. There aren't technically any new ones that you can use to your advantage in this game, but there is one that has been reworked called the Coin Coffer, which is quite obviously based on the money bags that we've already seen. There's not too much of a difference, but the Coin Coffer more closely resembles a frog purse than a bag of money. A returning enemy that sometimes drops a power-up if you defeat it is the Boomerang Bro, where if you get lucky and get one, you can then use the boomerang for yourself to attack enemies and collect coins. Thwoms work the same as they did in Super Mario 64, where you can get on top of them and use them as a way to platform to higher areas. It's crazy to think that in some games, they'll instantly kill you if you touch them. The whole gimmick of New Super Mario Bros. 2 for the 3DS is coin collection, and this is reflected in the new types of old enemies that are now gold. There's the gold bonsai bill that leaves a trail of coins behind it, the gold boos that run away from Mario leaving coins behind it, the gold bro that throws coins at you, the gold Goomba tower that when defeated drops several coins, the gold Lakitu who showers you with coins from above, the gold piranha plant that when defeated shoots coins out of its pipe, and finally the best is the gold Koopa that produces coins every time it hits something, meaning that if you position Mario just right, you can rack up the coins if you want to go for those secret screens. The next game in the series, New Super Mario Bros. U, only added one new enemy that's useful in the Targeting Ted, that appears in the Mighty Cannon Ship level. This foe is needed during that level's boss battle, as you have to position yourself properly so they hit Bowser Jr. instead of you, eventually defeating him. The only other mainline Mario game to come out on the Wii U was Super Mario 3D World, which added one of my favorite enemies of all time, the Ice Skate Goomba. Found in the game's snow-based levels, this enemy attempts to attack Mario by skating into him, but can be easily knocked out where you can then use the skate yourself. This is tons of fun to use, and I was glad to see it show up in the Nintendo Switch's Super Mario 3D World add-on, Bowser's Fury. The only other enemy from this game that's worth mentioning is the Hop Chop, which is quite literally a living spring that can be easily defeated and in some cases will transform into a springboard. The most recently released game in the mainline series is Super Mario Odyssey, that came out for the Switch in 2017, containing a new mechanic that greatly increases the usefulness of many enemies. This is the capture mechanic that has you using your new friend Cappy to literally become the game's enemies, using their specific abilities to help you uncover moons and other secrets. There are way too many to go over in this video alone, but some of my favorites are the Coin Coffer that's extremely useful in Luigi's Balloon World to increase your time, the giant T-Rex that lets you destroy the rock pillars in the Cascade Kingdom, the Moais that allow you to see hidden platforms, the Pokio that's a bird-like enemy with a beak, letting you attach the walls then fling in any direction, the Bullet Bill that lets you travel far distances and break certain blocks, and the Charging Chuck, which you can use to rush towards other enemies to defeat them. There's really only two non-capturable enemies that are somewhat useful in the Bifrost, that you can use as a platform to get much higher up in the air, but if you're too slow it will bite you dealing damage, and the Magmado, that's a tomato-based creature that on impact leaves a puddle on the ground that you can use if you've captured the lava bubble. I really hope they make a sequel to this game, as there's so many enemies that were left out that I'd love to use. Alright, that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below what you guys want to see next, and of course, subscribe to my channel. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!